Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Karla Corsino, and I'm climate policy researcher at Iniciativa Climática de México. I'm also part of the team of the Secretariat of Climate Transparency. Climate Transparency is a global partnership of national experts working to provide the knowledge needed to inform climate action in G20 countries. At the recent 13th Conference of the Paris to the UNFCCC, COP30 in Brazil, Climate Transparency and its partners released a collection of country notes to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement, and Brazil was featured in this release. So today, we're very pleased to speak with our partner from Brazil, William Wills from Centro Brasil, no Clima, to hear his national and global perspectives, a decade after one of the most significant international agreements of our time. Without further ado, William, I'd like to invite you to briefly introduce yourself and tell us about your role in climate policy over the past decade. Welcome again.
Hello, Carla. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to be here. As you said, my name is William Wills. I'm the technical director at Centro Brasil no Clima, or Brazilian Climate Center. And I am a long-standing partner of climate transparency here in Brazil for the last decade, let's put like that. I have been working for the last 15 years in the intersection of climate policy, economic modeling, and implementation, helping translate Brazilian international commitments into domestic action. Okay, so my work has been focused on NDC design, NDC studies in Brazil, modeling, articulation with stakeholders, carbon pricing, long-term strategies, and recently the climate plan, the Brazilian climate plan initiated in 2023 with sectoral mitigation pathways, targets, trying to align the Brazilian NDC economy-wide into sectoral targets. And so I try to work both on the technical side, scenario modeling, economic modeling, macroeconomic impacts, carbon pricing, and also on governance, trying to translate that with dialogue with policymakers, federal government, states, industry, finance. So in practice, my role has often been about turning abstract targets into operational decisions and also help policymakers with regulations.
Thank you so much. And just building a little bit on that, how has your perspective evolved since you first began working on climate policy?
Yeah, I have been working with climate change for a long time, since 2002, so 20-something years working on that at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And at the start, we were starting to build models, sectorial models, trying to understand trajectories, emission trajectories. And I accompanied all the development of negotiations, the NDCs, Paris Agreement. So it was a very rich time that I experienced. It was really interesting to be working on that. And for Brazil in the last decade, I see that the focus is changing from ambition, very high ambition, trying to present very ambitious targets, let's put like that, into implementation and credibility. We see that only ambition is not enough anymore. Okay, it was never enough, but it's important to have ambition, but it's also important to have implementation targets and to create the right environment for the implementation of those actions that you're planning.
Thank you so much. That gives a great sense of how your path has developed over time. And it also shows your rich experience. There are almost more than 30 years, almost. So, well, and looking back now, 10 years after the Paris Agreement, What stands out to you as the most significant shift in climate decision making in your country?
Okay. Yes, this is interesting. I have a short story to tell on that. Well, Brazil presented in 2015 the first NDC, an economy-wide NDC, and the government likes to say that it's very good for Brazil to have this economy-wide NDC because it brings flexibility for the country to choose which sector is going to reduce more or less. So that's true. In part, this is true, but the problem that came with it, the bad side of this decision was that 10 years after the Paris Agreement, no sector in Brazil knew how they should contribute to the NDC. So it provoked some inertia. Okay, so we were very flexible on the targets, and no sector had any target at all. It was a very difficult political timing in Brazil. This last decade, we had the impeachment of President Dilma, we had the pandemics, we have the war in Russia, Ukraine. We have a lot of difficulties globally and nationally speaking, but the final result was that inertia. We had 10 years of inertia in the country since the Paris Agreement. And only when President Lula was reelected in 2023, the government started to build the climate plan, Plano Clima, mitigation climate plan. So first they developed the new NDC, the second Brazilian NDC with increased ambition. And then during 2025, they developed the sectorial plans. And with the sectorial plans, they were trying to model and to discuss it politically with the different ministries and stakeholders, how each of the sectors would contribute to the Brazilian NDC, the second NDC. And it was a very rich process. It was the government learned to work together, the Ministry of Environment with the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Industry, of Transport. So for the first time, the ministries were working close together to try to find a solution for that. What would be the sectorial targets? So it was kind of not a fight, but it was a dispute on the space of emissions that each sector should have. So it was really interesting. And regarding the process, we advanced a lot, working together, having high-level modeling on the background to subsidize these discussions and the decision-making. And at the end, we had some other kind of difficulties regarding deforestation in public areas, deforestation in private areas. But at the end, the government found a way to accommodate all the requirements that came from the sectors. And finally, the climate plan was approved this January now of 2026. So now we have targets, sectorial targets. How they are going to apply, or it's still, we don't know yet how the government is going to enforce that. Okay, but it was a good advance on the climate policy in Brazil. Also, I have to mention that in the end of 2024, the carbon pricing mechanism was approved in Brazil. So we are going to have a regulated carbon market. It was approved by the Congress finally, after maybe 10 years plus of discussion on this issue. And for the next 4 years now, it's going to be regulated. A long regulation phase is going to be starting. Now we have the special secretary on carbon markets, and the plan is to have the market starting to work in 2030. The first phase will start probably in 2030.
Thank you so much. It's very clear that Brazil has come a long way and continues to make progress. So it's very interesting to see how it has been is being developed along all these years. And do you think Was there a particular moment, reform, or policy decision that you consider a real turning point in these 10 years for Brazil?
Well, we have been seeing this. It's a difficult question because it involves a lot of things in the background, right? We had the election of President Trump 2 times in the US. We had the election of President Bolsonaro here in Brazil that was following Trump's targets to leave the Paris Agreement and things like that. So first, we have a big movement that Brazilian Climate Center, the CBC, Centro Brasil Clima, created when Bolsonaro was elected, that was to bring together the 26 states and the federal district, okay, and to try to make some opposition to the Bolsonaro's government that wanted to get out of the Paris Agreement. So we ended up having 25 signatures out of 27 state leaders in Brazil, and with that we could keep Brazil in the Paris Agreement, and this was very important. Bolsonaro was it's a negationist, okay? He doesn't believe in climate change, and same as Trump, and it was very important by the time to have that. So we lost 4 years because of that, and when Lula was elected, he bring a lot of importance back to the climate agenda. So now the debate is less about, let's say, targets, ambitious targets, and more about trade-offs, about cost, competitiveness, jobs, industrial policy, and long-term planning. And so the federal government created this economic transition plan, long-term, for Brazil to take a look on different sectors that Brazil, on the new economy, the green economy, new sectors that Brazil could profit and could be a global leader. And this was prepared in the first years of President Lula's government and is now ready. So this, I think that this reflects maturity, and climate policy is now treated more as an economic policy than just having ambitious targets.
Thank you. We're coming back to negationism in some questions more, but just building on this question, in your view, what is the biggest difference between what was being said back then and what is being said today with the new government?
10 years ago, we had President Dilma as a leader here in Brazil, and we had Isabella Teixeira as the environment minister, and she had a great role in negotiating with the Congress and with the other ministries, the first Brazilian NDC. So 10 years ago, we were in the right track. Okay, the problem was not what we had 10 years ago. The real problem was in between that we had the Bolsonaro's government from 2019 to 2022. So we had 4 years of negationists in power. So it made climate policies like reduce ambition. We had reduced finance for environmental issues. We had the increase of deforestation in an important way during Bolsonaro's government. And this was really bad. And as you might know, deforestation reduction is one of the key actions that Brazil should pursue to reach the Brazilian NDC. It's the main target until 2030 and 2035. So in our target regarding that, we have this zero deforestation commitment until 2030, which is going to be really a very, very complex and difficult action to take, because the extension is very, very big. We have more than 5 million square kilometers of in the legal Amazon. We have more than 30 million people living there, and it's very difficult for the government to get to the final or to the margin, the last marginal square kilometers that's going to be deforested. So I foresee that we might have some difficulties to get there, but we are in the right track. In the last few years, deforestation has been reducing quickly again, fortunately.
That's great to hear. And zooming out to the international level for a moment, and as we look ahead to COP31 and the next decade, what do you see as the two or maybe three most critical gaps the international community still needs to address?
Well, I would say implementation, climate finance, and also political durability, the three biggest gaps. For implementation, I see that many NDCs remain disconnected from sectoral policies. In terms of finance, there is a big mismatch between ambition and available capital, especially in emerging economies. With high interest rates, difficult to access capital for investments in low carbon infrastructure, and also durability. Climate policy must survive political cycles and external shocks, and we see that in the current global environment, this has been a real problem, and we have been seeing that different countries are electing negationist leaders, and this is very bad for the durability of the climate targets.
Yes, indeed, negationism is a global problem that is, of course, not only happening in Brazil or in Latin America. It's a global problem. So, from your perspective, what's driving this? And what role do you think initiatives like climate transparency can play in responding to it?
This is also a very tough question. I have my own theories behind that, and trying to summarize. Well, I see that the West, Europe, and the Americas are in a difficult position, difficult demographics dynamics. We are reaching the a point that where population will soon begin to reduce total population. And if you take a look on active population and on the retired population, we see that growing very fast in those countries. And this pressures a lot the fiscal system of the different countries, and it makes the countries print more money and have more inflation. And we also see that the West is losing a bit of participation in global economy, also because of that, also because of lack of, let's say, innovation, as we see in China, in other Asian countries. And this is making the population look for different and easy solutions, trying to get out of that bad cycle, okay? And because of that, I think that they are sometimes electing people that come, populists that come with easy solutions for very difficult and complex problems. And together with those easy solutions, they say that climate change doesn't exist, it's not real, it's created. So I think the core of the problem is really that. And how to combat that, I really don't know. It's a very difficult question, but I think we should have a lot of transparency. We should try to show what will be the clear benefits. We should be fair, trying to promote a just transition. I think that being transparent and trying to promote a just transition is the key. uh, to yeah to bring the population back to the this agenda. Okay, so transparency reduces space for disinformation and plays a critical role by grounding debates in comparable, credible evidence, trying to expose myths and highlighting real trade-offs that we are going to face.
Yes, I agree. Transparency is very important, and more with all these problems, I think we should take this into account. And well, we know that countries like the United States and Argentina have openly questioned or stepped back from the Paris Agreement process. So, what impact do you think this could have on global climate action?
Well, for sure, it weakens global coordination and serves as a very bad example for other countries and other leaders that might be, let's say, tempted to do the same when they are elected. But this does not eliminate domestic need to act, okay, for the other countries. So I think global cooperation will become harder, especially on finance and markets. The U.S. being the biggest economy for the country, it's a very bad. Uh, uh, it's very bad to have the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement. But climate risk, industrial transformation, and competitiveness pressures will not disappear with that. Many countries, including Brazil, are increasingly driven by domestic economic logic, not only international pressure. So I think that we should try to hold on the climate agenda, to hold that. And if every other country tries to do what is needed, maybe in a few years with a different president on those countries, they're coming back to the Paris Agreement, and we will be able to try to hold the increasing temperature as much as we can.
Yes, and working together also it's very important. Also, many new countries are now becoming leaders too. Brazil, I think, is becoming one of them. Do you think that these dynamics could affect your country's progress on implementation?
I think it raises the cost of action because less cooperation means that the ones that are still in the Paris Agreement will need to do more to hold temperature increase. And also with less cooperation, less globalization, it means higher domestic effort for most of the countries. But this reinforces the need for clear sectoral planning, efficient instruments, rather than vague commitments. So I think this is the way, but of course it's bad news that the U.S. and Argentina are out, and increases the cost of action for sure for everyone.
And turning to implementation on the ground, where do you think Brazil has genuinely made progress and where has it fallen short?
Well, as I said a bit in the first answer, it was very important that Brazil finally detailed its NDC domestically with the mitigation climate plan, Plano Clima, and put developed modeling, sectorial modeling, discussed politically with the different ministries and stakeholders. And now we have sectorial targets. This was a very big improvement for the country. Also, we had the approval of the regulated carbon market in 2024, in December 2024, and it's going to be fully operational by 2030. This was also an important measure. And together with that, we had other developments in energy transition, hydrogen, on advanced fuels. We had also decarbonization plan for Brazilian industry, published recently. So we have had many improvements in the last few years in Brazil, and the worries that we have right now is to have those plans not as a plan of government A or B, but to have it as a plan for Brazil, despite the president that's going to be there, we have to follow those policies and have a clear target for each of the sectors with credibility, with transparency, and trying to have this long-term signal that will improve and attract investments in different areas. And so in the last few years, we developed a lot regarding different plans for different sectors. We also improved reducing deforestation, as I said. But if we take a look in energy, industry, transport, maybe we could have done better in terms of real action in the country.
Thank you. And do you think there's an specific gap we often see between ambition and execution, like climate finance, cooperation, monitoring, or any other?
Yes, we do have a gap. Well, regarding fossil fuels, for example, Brazil is preparing to start the exploration of the equatorial margin, which might have a very big oil reserve. So if we take a look at IPCC and the International Energy Agency, exploring new oil fields is not in line with the Paris Agreement for sure. So this is one of the gaps that we have. Also, this is very capital intensive. This oil exploration of new oil fields, very capital intensive. And this capital would be very welcome to low carbon mitigation options that we have here in Brazil. And this is a big gap. So not only additional investments for mitigation is needed, but also we have to promote a very big shift in the investments that are currently done in Brazil. We have an investment rate of about 20% per year of the GDP. 20% of the GDP every year is invested again to for new machines, for different kinds of investment. And we should start to promote a shift on this 20% of the GDP investments, because if we take a look only on additional investments for mitigation, when we do MAC curves and studies like that in Brazil, we see that the yearly investment that we should have for that, the additional investment would be less than 1% of GDP, closer to 0.5% of GDP. So if we could promote a shift on all the investment of the Brazilian economy, we could transition much faster and fast enough to reach the Paris Agreement.
Thank you so much for this. And as we start to wrap up our conversation, despite all the challenges we've discussed, what gives you hope today that perhaps didn't exist 10 or also maybe 20 years ago?
For sure, we have a better institutional framework right now. The Ministry of Environment has been leading this topic and is working very closely to the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Science and Technology, and Ministry of Industry and other ministries. So institutionally speaking, they are working much better right now than they were working before. Okay, so this is a very good, very big improvement that we had in Brazil. We also have much better tools right now, different models, different kind of models, high-level modeling we do have in Brazil right now that can subsidize decision-making. And Brazil now understands what works and what doesn't work, and understands what are the needs to reduce deforestation, which I have to mention again is the most important target that we have until 2030 is to get to net zero deforestation in Brazil, and this is the biggest part of our NDC. If we take a look on the costs for that, the cost for ton is not very high compared to high technologies, but as the extension of this measure is so big, 5 million square kilometers, of Amazon forest we have in Brazil, the target at the end is very difficult, and the amount of investments needed to hold that is also very big. Well, so to sum up, now we have more technical capacity, we have better data, we have more integration between climate, industrial, fiscal policy, economic policy. I think that the debate is harder. We are facing now real economic problems, but the debate is also more honest right now. Okay, so, and this is more transparent. So we're getting closer to the solution by being more transparent and having the hard debate, and this is very good. So I'm kind of optimistic with Brazilian climate policy. Okay, not that much optimistic with economic policy, but with climate policy, I think we are going to the right direction.
Yes, and also what you were telling, it also gives me hope that we're getting closer to the solution. It's very good hearing this. And finally, what message would you like to send to decision makers right now?
Well, the first message is that we need to work together. Okay, different ministries, private sector, universities, specialists. We should work together, discuss together, so each one understands the point of view of the others, and then develop together a solution. Okay, this is very important, and we have seen that this worked very well in Brazil in the past, so we should be doing that. So targets matter, but plans, institution, transparency, participation of the society, and for sure, financing matter more than only having ambitious targets.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we've run out of time for today. William, really thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights with climate transparency. And of course, thanks to our audience for listening in. Remember that you can find the A Decade from Paris Country Notes collection, including insights from William and Centro Brasil no Clima, on our website, YouTube, Spotify, and your favorite podcast app. What do you make of these 10 years of climate action? Please feel free to share your thoughts with us. You can find us on LinkedIn and Instagram as Climate Transparency. Thank you and see you next time.